Hey everyone, good morning. What's going on? Hope you're all having a great day and a great week. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at conditional rendering inside of React, which is going to be section number 7 of the React documentation under main concepts. So I have here a brand new project, and like we have in every other video, and what I'm going to do now, again, just like in every other video, is I am going to delete whatever is inside here inside of the app component, and I'll just create a div just so that stops giving me an error. But if we go back here, we don't have anything rendering because we deleted everything. Next thing that we are going to do is we're going to create 3 components. So let's go ahead and do that. We will create IsLoggedIn.jsx. I started using, I guess you don't have to use JSX, but I started using JSX. So we do that. And then we're going to have import here. We'll import React from React. As you can see, I've not yet made this into a snippet, but either way, function, and I'm still using the ES5 things syntax because that's just what I'm used to from the documentation. Is logged in. This of course takes in the props, and we will export default is logged in, and then in here we will return is logged in works. Now let's copy that so that we can save some time. We'll create a new one and call it is logged out, and we'll just switch this to say is logged out. Copy and paste that a couple times here again, and then we will make a new one called greeting JSX. And what we're going to do is basically just we're going to have this variable, right? And if the variable equal for is logged in, we're going to have this variable inside of the greeting component, and if it equals to true, then we're going to show the is logged in component, which will have a message saying welcome, maybe someone's name. And if it's false, it'll have the is logged out message saying please log in, and then we'll have a button that basically just says log in or log out, whichever one it should be. We'll see. And then we'll say this is greeting here. Okay, awesome. Now let's really quick, actually nothing's going to be there because we didn't render anything. Let's now say greeting here, and then inside here we will get rid of those and we'll say is logged in, is logged out. Let's take a look at that. Something didn't work. That's because these two things need to be inside of a div. Silly me. Whoops, it's not what I meant to do. And then here, okay, now cool, we have is logged in works and is logged out works. However, that's not quite what we want, because we want to be able to detect if the user is logged in, right? Then we want to show that is logged in and maybe someone's name, maybe my name, your name, whatever. So let's go ahead and inside of the greeting, we'll create a const. Sorry, the air conditioning is about to go on, but regardless, is logged in. Let's not use the same thing. We'll say user logged in. We'll set this to be false. And then we should also, actually no, here, what we can do is instead of this, because now we actually don't need that, this can go here. What we can do is now in the return, we're going to return something different depending on whether or not they're logged in. So we will say if user logged in, then return the logged in component, and they're logged out, right? Let's actually change what they say now, so that, because we're not just trying to see to make sure that they work. So we'll say please log in, and then inside the login we will say welcome. Okay, now we have this says please log in because they're logged in, obviously, right? But if I change this to true, excuse me, this now says welcome. Also, what I can do is, not that we're using any development tools right now, but oh, okay, that was stupid. We're not actually using these right now, but just in case we can put them there. Okay, so cool. We have that. Awesome. Also, we can have this be adjusted to be a prop, so then we can pass it in from our app. So we can have, I think it was, don't even remember what I called it already. Logged in will equal true. It says welcome. Go back to false. It still says welcome. Cool. What did we do wrong? Didn't do anything wrong. Greeting. Oh, we did do something wrong. This should be a JavaScript expression, not an actual string of true or false. So here, if I change that to true now, this goes back. Okay, great. So that works. So that makes sense. I feel like I knew that, but whatever. Okay, so let's go talk about something different. So let's talk about something a little bit different. Let's add a button here, okay? So we want to have a button. So we will have a button like this, and it will say, for right now, it'll say login, but obviously we're going to have to change that. And there's multiple ways that you can do this to just have this button work the way that we kind of want it to here. Also, this is going to throw an error, but just because I'm trying to show you something, I just want to demonstrate it in this particular way, which is also the way the documentation has it set up, in case you're wondering. And then we'll say on click, which, interestingly enough, this on click, which was what I'm about to, we're going to, excuse me, this on click thing with the passing, like using a prop to pass down a function for the on click for an event handler, which is something that we actually did in the last video, is something that I've been forgetting to do in the remake of GRUB, which I've been working on. So what we're going to do now is we'll have this on click, and we'll say props.handle login. Of course, this doesn't exist right now. We can put it here, and actually what we would have to do is change this to be a class. Normally, maybe you wouldn't want to do that with your app component. Maybe you want to do that in like a login controller component or something, whatever you want to do. This is just for simplicity, the way that I'm choosing to do this. And this will extends React.component, and then we will have we'll have a constructor. We are going to have state here. Prompts, super, no, not that. I didn't even know that was a tag. And then this dot state will equal logged in will equal false, except it's not going to be like that, either of these two things. Now here, this will now be this dot state dot logged in. What's the problem? Unexpected token. That's because, why did we add it there? Didn't actually need it there. Don't know why I added it. Oh, that's not why. Hold on. Sorry. Render. Okay. Now we're back to normal, just like we were before, except that, of course, this doesn't actually do anything. And that is because we handle login. So props, handle login will now be this handle login method, method that we're going to be making. And so inside here, we will just basically do this dot set state to have login be equal to, actually we need to do this. We need pre-state and we need props. And then this will equal whatever pre-state dot login is not. That gives us an error because we're not actually doing anything, and so we're going to say this dot handle login no. App.js line 18. That's because this should have that, I believe. Okay, now the button goes away, but in general, that did actually work. Okay, so now we are changing. I know this is kind of drawn out, but now we're changing this to kind of have this button, which can toggle it back and forth. Of course, the button goes away, which isn't what we want, but and that's because this is getting rendered here. So in fact, let's get rid of this. Yeah, let's get rid of this for right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to put this button here, right here. So we're going to copy this. We'll put it here for now. We'll put that right there. That's totally fine, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to have this button actually not go here. We're going to have it go. Actually, I don't think we need this either. Let's clean this up a little bit here. It's going to go inside of here, inside of this render right here, except that we're going to have a variable called button. And then we're going to say if, and then we'll have an else on here as well. And we'll say if, also let's have a, actually that can change. So let's have a let, and we'll say is logged in, and this will equal whatever state equals for this, right? So we'll have this dot state dot logged in, and then we'll say is logged in. Then we will have button will equal like that. And it'll say log in, right? But if it's not, also on click, it should be this. Handle login, and this doesn't actually exist anymore, so now it's going to be that, right? And so if not though, it's going to say log out. Let's give that a shot. Actually, this won't work because then the next thing we have to do, and this is, I know this is very long, I do apologize. This is what I wanted to get to show you guys, is that you can conditionally, so in the curly braces in React, when you put that in the JSX, that renders whatever that expression is. It doesn't render that as text as we've seen in other videos. So if we were to put this here, what should happen is that we can basically store an element inside of a variable outside of our JSX, whatever the rendering thing is that we're putting together. Excuse me, and then we can put it inside of the return statement to actually render that, right? And the reason that this is great is because, or part of the reason this is great, is because it helps us to clean up our markup, right? So we don't have to have it be all muddied up. And of course, this doesn't work, and that's because we're still just rendering both of them, which we shouldn't be doing. So instead, this should be let's fix this really quick. We'll say if props dot something. I'll go find out what that something is in a second. Then return this, okay? And the props that we're going to look for is this logged in thing here. We'll go back, and now we get that. And now we can see that when we click on this, two things happen. Number one, this changes, which we know because that changed before. But also, we can see that this log out and the login button is changing. It's saying log in. Actually, it's incorrect though. It's saying it at the wrong time. So we should say if this is false, then it'll say please log in. We hit log in, it says welcome, and we can log out. Great. So that's how we can easily put an element inside of a variable and then conditionally render that element just the same, but cleaning it up a little bit and just using variables to hold the data that we want to hold and put the data where we want to put it. Okay, so let's take this a step further, and something that I want to show you guys, which is something that when I first was learning this, I was like, oh, that looks a little bit complicated. I don't really want to use that. You know, I'd rather just do it this way. It's a little bit more verbose. You know, you have like an if statement kind of like that, and it makes more sense. It's easier to read. And then kind of as time went on, I was like, no, I actually love this this other alternative way of doing things. And I would like to show you guys how to do that right now. This is basically using a logical AND operator to basically conditionally render an element. So let's take a look at this, and we'll say props dot, I again forget what it was. Props dot is logged in, and then we'll say and here, and it doesn't work. Why doesn't that work? Does it need to be inside of a div? Oh, okay. I guess it needs to be inside of a div. You can't just have it be right there. But so essentially what's going on, and we'll add another one for is logged in. So essentially what's going on now is instead of having that if statement that we had before, we're basically saying if this equals to true, then evaluate to expression. And this works because in JavaScript, if the first condition evaluates to true and then there's an expression, it evaluates to expression. And if it's false and expression, it evaluates to just false and it won't render your expression. So let's take a look and see if this changes anything. So we have this please log in. We hit log in. We now logged in and it says welcome and gives us the option to log out. So nothing's changed, but then again, we didn't expect it to. It's good that it didn't change because this is exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to have an alternative way of doing the exact same thing that we had done before with those if statements, except now we've cleaned it up and we've taken all of those if statements and the two different return statements that were conditionally, happening, and we've basically put it into one return statement and these two lines that make everything a lot cleaner and easier to read. And if you're looking at this and saying, well, Garrett, I think this is a little too much for me. Maybe, I just want to stick to the if statement. That's okay. Stick to the if statement. But if you're like me, or even if you're not like me, you might find that perhaps you really, really would rather have that this syntax, which just becomes easier to read as you become more and more experienced and start to feel more comfortable with this. Okay, so something else let's take a look at is inside of this this button here. We can kind of also get rid of this by simply going there. We're going to delete this, and we'll come down here to the button. We'll also replace this, and inside of here where the login thing is, we'll get rid of that. We'll put in the condition like this, and we'll say IsLoggedIn, which now goes to this thing here. We can also get rid of this let variable for the button. And we're going to use a ternary operator, which basically is a way of detecting if something is true or false, and then doing something with that result. So we will say if logged in is true, then we will say log out. Otherwise, meaning if it's false, we'll say log in. Let's take a look here. Now, let's consider this. We're not expecting anything to change. We want it to work the same way that we did before. So we're logged in, or we're not logged in, we're logged out. So it says log in. And then when we log in, it says welcome. And again, it still says log out. And we can do this all day long. It'll just be the same thing over and over again. And this, again, is really good because that's exactly what we wanted to happen. We wanted this to not change. We just wanted a cleaner, more simple way of doing it. And all of a sudden now, we've gotten rid of all of our if statements, and we haven't actually lost any of the functionality. And it's a lot easier to read, a lot simpler, a lot cleaner. So I would also show you that you can do this with larger expressions. I'm going to copy this button, but I'm also going to comment it out so I can show you guys this right now. And I want to show you that that we can do this thing with larger expressions where we also have this ternary type operator. Okay, so we can say is logged in, and then we'll have parentheses because this is going to be bigger, and then we can just put our button here, except that because it doesn't need to be an expression there. If we're logged in, we're going to say log out. Otherwise, meaning if it's false, we will say log in. Let's try that. Please log in. We hit log in, welcome, log out. Okay, great. And we don't get any errors. That's also good. Now, while this is totally cool, you can 100% do this. It is important to note that this is a longer way of doing things. In fact, one might argue that if these expressions were to get big enough, it might actually just be easier to use an if statement if that was in case the way you wanted to go. I'm going to delete this because although it is perfectly valid, I don't like that. If I can, I want to stick to something really small like this here. But either way, it's up to you. Both are valid. Whichever is easier to use is what you should probably go with. Okay, so the last thing that I want to talk about is, let's say that you don't want a component to render. Well, you do want a component to render, but you don't want its contents to be able to render unless something happens. You want to be able to control that, right? So what we can do is I'm going to demonstrate this with the logout component, or the login component rather. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if props dot show is equal to false because I have this exclamation mark here, then return null. And watch what happens. But first, actually, we have to put on here the is logged in right here. I just have to put show, and then I'll put false. Please log in. We get nothing. We're logged in now. It doesn't say welcome, right? And if I change this to true, then it works. I want to show you guys something though here. This div is still being rendered. Okay, and let's see. I don't have a way of doing that, but you can see here. Wait, actually, I have to set this to false. So what I want to show you is that this div right here, right, from our is logged in component is still being rendered, but the contents within the component are not being rendered. And this is something that in maybe a more rare occurrence, you might want to do this, that you might want to render the component itself, but not render the contents within the component, and you can do that. And that's how we did it, right? So what we did is we went there, and instead of, we have this prop to detect whether or not we want to render it or not. And instead of rendering the contents of it, before we get there, we just detect if that prop meets the condition, and then we simply return null. And then it just forgets everything else. The component is now rendered or returned. You have to do a re-render to get it back, right? And so you can do that. That's totally fine. Valid way of doing things. It maybe is a more specific use case for that, but it's something that you can definitely do. That's actually going to be it for this video because we have indeed reached the end of this section of the documentation right here. That's what we just went over. If you guys enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, comment, let me know how I did. Let me know, how I can make these videos better. Now that we're more than halfway done with this section of React, or with the main concepts of React. So is there anything else that you want to see coming up specifically in React that maybe are not in the main concepts? Because now we can kind of jump around a little bit, get into some more advanced stuff, or at least coming up, we can do that after we get through these main concepts, I should say. But either way, let me know down in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.